Welcome to the Connected Campus podcast, where we explore the ways that diverse professionals are working every day to optimize their efforts to recruit, retain, and graduate their students.
I'm excited for our conversation today to explore something that, even through all my years of podcasting in various places, I've not really spent a lot of quality time on around. In the college realm, financial education is something a lot of people talk about, think we should be doing more of, and are kind of talking about the best ways to do it. So, our guest today will be someone who can bring a lot of expertise to this topic, and I'm really excited to explore it together. But David, if you want to just take a moment to introduce yourself to everyone and give a overview of your professional background before we get into the rest of the conversation.
Well, thank you, Dustin, and thanks for having me. I really appreciate being able to join you today. I'm David Glezerman. Currently, I'm the managing partner of the DRG Group, which is a consulting firm that provides training services and business process management and review services for colleges, universities, and many corporations who do work, particularly in the student finance realm for higher education. Prior to starting the DRG Group, I spent 40 years in higher education, working my way up the chain, I guess, from that simple clerk all the way into an assistant vice presidentship at Temple University, where I had 33 years of my career, 7 years of that before that at a community college, and now total of about 44 years working with students, working with colleges and universities, and learning about financial education myself, coming out of the banking world before I got into higher education, plus just seeing what students really needed. I think I was responsible both at the community college level and in at Temple, dealing with student finance, making sure students paid their bills, listening to families tell you why they couldn't pay their bills, and doing all those types of things, even tying into the financial aid world a little bit, but just getting an understanding of how to finance an education.
Well, I guess I'm curious as like a quick clarifying thing because I think it's always sort of a interesting thing to zoom in on is you mentioned like you were in like finance banking world before going to higher ed. Like, was that just sort of like a happenstance, just sort of like, I'll do this for a little while, like getting into higher ed, and then you stayed. I assume because you enjoyed the work and everything. Like, what was that sort of like decision point to even make that shift from the finance world into higher ed?
Dustin, it's funny because again, even back in the day, I came out of college with a degree. I expected to go get a job in journalism. At the time, Woodward and Bernstein were the hot ticket. Well, I didn't want to move into places where I could get that job, so I had some work as a summer job collecting debts. So I managed to get into banking because I knew somebody who knew somebody. I thought it would be part-time job for a while. Again, just get my feet wet till I ended up in journalism. It turned out that I enjoyed that type of work for a while, and then one day, the banking world wasn't as exciting. They had put me into working with student loans, and collecting student loans back in the late 70s was if you try and make a phone call and you try and reach a loan borrower, you've met all the compliance requirements that the federal government put in place. I mean, just making the attempt was good enough. So, job came along at Community College of Philadelphia. I actually got to start up a collection department there,
Mm-hmm.
dealing again more of the darker side. Students that weren't paying their bills or had loans couldn't pay their loans back. So, I I kind of went. I won't say the back door, but in a way, it was very much like the thing nobody else wanted to do. But
Mm-hmm.
again, I have had some experience. It kind of fit well. The move to higher ed, I thought I was really surprised. I never expected that. Then when I moved to Temple, it was more of a reclamation project. I was there to help fix some issues with various student loan programs and management. I thought it would be a 2, 3 year job and I'd find something else. Next thing I know, I'm there 33 years.
Yeah. And I guess I'm also sort of teeing up of just like, yeah, you kind of just like, took it at the job at the time and, uh, found, I guess, especially at Temple, like a very positive professional home. So like, can you identify maybe something that really like helped keep you there, kind of keep you engaged with the work? Because it really is that where there's a pretty clear through line of like working in sort of the financial world of higher education throughout your entire career. So like, you know, if there is like a thing or a collection of things that just sort of like really um, kept you at Temple and kept doing the work.
I think the challenges were really trying to get students to manage themselves, manage their finances, helping parents, because I think one of the things I saw early on in the Temple days, and higher education really didn't start to model itself into thinking how an education should be financed, probably till maybe the last 10, 15 years. Before that, admissions people really didn't want to talk about money. The goal was, let's attract students, let's recruit, let's register, let's retain. The money part will work itself out. And there was this real fear of even talking about how to finance an education. So I think one of the things I saw was that need to have those types of conversations,
Mhm.
because how many times would we see students who eventually would drop out or stop out? I mean, we saw this even in the community college world. You had enough money to pay for a semester, you took your courses, and then either you had to work to get more money, or you had to find financial aid resources or find some other vehicle to pay the bill. So a 2-year degree could take 3, 4, 5 years to complete. And a lot of times it wasn't being done by day, it was being done at night and working by day. At Temple, bigger, a 4-year institution, you're talking undergraduate, graduate level, and professional, different challenges, different needs from the various types of students. And again, a situation where families did not necessarily see financing an education as a 4-year process. We file a FAFSA this year, we apply for financial aid, we know what we're going to get for this year, and we won't worry about the rest of it until next year. We'll see what financial aid's going to do for us then. If there's a gap, if you didn't financial aid didn't cover the whole bill, well, we'll figure it out, or you'll just extend this credit, and we'll pay you after my son or daughter graduates. I don't know any place you can do that in today's world. That type of credit. Yeah, you hear about the term "buy now, pay later." Higher education hasn't fit that model in 40 plus years, and I don't see that happening in the near future either with what's going on.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I think, yeah, like there's one, just it makes me think of like, I think it's a common complaint that people have about like healthcare, where it's like, in both areas, like education is important. If somebody, is trying to pursue education, that's like, yeah, like you said, put a lot of emphasis on recruiting and getting them in and all that. We'll figure out paying for it later. Cause, in theory, it is sort of a like buy now, pay later, in the sense of like, you may not have to start making payments until later, but like that is like, it's a financial commitment pretty quickly. Like it is like a binding thing pretty quickly. So, and then like the idea of like healthcare, where it's like, oh, you're not feeling well, just come in, we'll take care of you, we'll figure out the payment later, you'll get a bill for whatever later on in some indeterminate amount of time, and you'll just have to figure it out, kind of thing. And that's just another complaint that people have, is like, and it's just a tough thing where it's like, yeah, if I knew the sticker price of this procedure, maybe I wouldn't get it. But it's like, well, don't you need it? But like, so it's a whole other thing. But I think that sort of complexity in those difficulties and those sort of things, I know that, I guess what I'm sort of hearing is like the challenge is sort of like part of the appeal. It's just being like, wow, like there's like, a kind of not here that I want to try to help undo by helping to, give a kind of effective modern, financial education to these students, so they're able to make, well-informed decisions about, how many credits am I taking? What's my pace? Or like, what are the scholarships or loans or grants or all these different things that I'm going to be accessing? And then certainly just as they're going out into the world, the working world, how are they, navigating the choices that they'll encounter about, what job I'm taking where and, whatever else. So, I say all that also to kind of just like kind of segue into our topic at hand of like, you know, I'm curious, because obviously, yeah, you sort of are encountering these uh, issues around, students who are financing their education and everything. So just generally trying to kind of implore upon them, effective financial know-how and everything. So to start, like, what do you think are the concepts that make an effective modern financial education? Because I'm curious if it's like there's always just kind of the fundamentals that haven't really changed too much that you just want to try to convey to people in a relevant way, or that it's like just a constantly changing, world of finances that we have to keep up with and teach differently and all those sort of things. So we'll start there. What are the concepts that make up, financial education?
Dustin, I think you've got a couple of components. As it pertains directly to higher education, how do I finance an education over 4 years or 2 years? Is it just financial aid? When do I start saving money? Because how many we've run into this many times. The families will figure out they've got to start saving for their child's education senior year of high school. Well, way too late. It's just a matter. You know, I can't say you start this at birth, although there've been savings programs out there developed that you can start putting money away and let it ride for 18 years. And guess what? That may pay for the first semester with today's costs. But still, there's something out there. The planning is part of it. So to me, that's a key component. And planning, not just on how to pay for college, but thinking about this from a holistic approach. How do young people learn how to deal with credit? How do they learn about savings? I mean, we rarely talk about savings because the mindset is spend, 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 and you want things, you've got to pay for them. What's that real price of what you're paying for in the long run? How do you manage, when you get out of school? While you're in school, you may be living in a residence hall, or you may share an apartment with some of your friends on or just off campus. What happens when you don't have that connection? How do you deal with landlords? How do you deal with buying a car? All the things that you're going to have to deal with. Yeah, I'd say life experiences. And I think what I find ironic is that colleges, universities have almost been forced to teach more about finances because young people are not getting that experience at home. They're not getting it in secondary schools. They usually are getting it from their friends or from the internet. So what's right, what's wrong? Yeah, it's hard to say. Is there any one place you can get solid, accurate information? I think in today's world, there are a lot of places you can get information. What's right may vary, but more importantly, what's right for you as an individual. I'm focusing on the traditional student. There's also a side of financial education. We talk about first generation students and families. When I was dealing as the bursar at Temple and we're asking people to pay their bills, how many times would folks come in with a paper check because they weren't comfortable mailing a check? They weren't comfortable going online. There's a generational issue that comes into play. There's an issue of not just financial literacy, but computer literacy. The fear that you may get hacked if you put your checking account number into a computer. Well, you can just as easily have the envelope with your paper check stolen out of a mailbox. So there are so many things to overcome, but just that educational process and just eliminating the fears, eliminating the concerns, a lot of the doubts, because when you're dealing with money, there's always a lot of concern.
Yeah.
How much is this costing? yeah, the expectation for what you're paying for an education, why we're having big discussions in society today about the value of a college education.
Hmm.
You know, all these things come into play, but you know, back to your original point, you know, the foundation of a good financial education is not just to help a student understand about how to apply for financial aid or dealing with student loans. It's building a foundation for them to make good decisions to ultimately be able to live the lifestyle that they hope for and to have the tools readily available to know what to do with money. And you know, when they're going to need, you know, you never know when an emergency arises. If you don't have that little reserve of funds ready, if you when your car breaks down, yeah, maybe you've got a credit card. Hopefully you do. You can put the bill on the card. If you don't have that, if you don't have a good line of credit, what do you do when there's a crisis?
Hmm.
What do you do when you want to rent a car? You're traveling. You know, it's easy. Yeah, put the Visa or Mastercard out there. Everybody will rent you. Will rent you a car. You don't have that type of credit. You know, there's probably 20 hoops you're going to go through,
Right.
and you know that's where I think you start to run into fears. So I think, yeah, having that foundation about finance, about dealing with money, about all the concerns that come about. Again, from the higher ed perspective, this is something you don't necessarily teach in the classroom, but the experience that you're going to give to students, whether they're first generation, traditional, adult learners, goes a long way toward their success. And it's the type of thing, yeah, if I'm in higher education, I want to say that we're making an investment from high school to grave. You know, we educate, we get you the academic knowledges. You can get a career after 4 years of graduate school, however that plays out. But we're trying to build a commitment over time that you'll also become a donor back to your institution.
Right. Because yeah, I mean, like, yeah, certainly people are gonna not like want to donate if they just had to like, I think like muscle through and struggle and sort of just like endure their college experience, which like finances are always going to be, I think, a looming specter over a lot of students nowadays. Where like, these are a lot of uh, first generation students and coming from underrepresented backgrounds, and just sort of people who are looking at the kind of social mobility aspect of education. So it may be that they're coming from backgrounds who just don't have a lot of financial support from family, and just they haven't had those opportunities to have those conversations to learn about these things. And where my brain was going was like, I feel like very often, like a lot of, you know, like money is emotional, and the anxiety can come from just like the ambiguity, like the uncertainty, the, area where people just don't know what's going on. But then, like, buying a car or different things, like, and like, like used car salesmen, like these like very negative things are just like, they're going to like thrive on that ambiguity. Like if you go in there not knowing what you're doing, you might end up paying too much, or like, just being stuck again in a commitment that uh isn't ultimately going to be serving you. So like, uh there's a lot of impacts where, like, you have a car payment that's too high for what you're making, or you have to work too much to be able to afford it, but then that prevents you from studying, and having your time be well balanced and being successful and enjoying your college experience. So like, there's a lot that I think, makes this stuff so important for college students, just in their, their positive, experience that they can have on campus, and their persistence and retention and those sort of things. Cause like, I think like there's a lot of surveys out there that would show like, financial burdens, whether it's just the explicit cost of college that's unsustainable for them, or like you said, like a car breaks down, or they have a medical expense that's unexpected, like that just completely derails their program. But there's such a opportunity for higher education to both give sort of the financial education to equip them to make smart choices, to be able to, like you said, live the lifestyle that they want to, certainly like after college, but also like be in a place that I think is going to be uh, suitable to them, persisting and finishing, their degree in the first place. But then like what I've also been really pleased to see is the safety net that a lot of institutions have developed, especially over the pandemic, of having like, the dean's emergency relief fund or something. So if a student kind of raises a flag and be like, yeah, like I've totaled my car and I need to get to my job so I can afford to pay for my apartment to study here and those sort of things, they can be like, yeah, like, you just need the money to repair the car. Like, we'll give it to you. Like, it's a grant here, like do it, because it's like in the grand scheme of our millions of dollar budget to give you 500 unexpected dollars to repair your car so you persist and like it's a huge ROI for us. Like we're happy to do it or whatever, like, so I'm very pleased to see those sort of things where like they have that opportunity as an institution with their resources to give that relief, and also hopefully like prevent some of that if they like sort of can, properly give financial education to help people build themselves up and everything, and try to, I guess, also acknowledge like, and I'll kind of give a shout out to our uh fall summit session that we did around like being inclusive of all learners, where like if you create sort of a programming philosophy and you can, utilize the faculty and, staff and such that you have at your institution to help be speakers for these sort of things, but you can kind of offer like, okay, we're starting from the very beginning of like financial education 101, here's what you need to know. And you can kind of like move up with people and be like, okay, like you're about to graduate, like do you have a car, do you have like, yeah, like is it like credit cards, and these like this is why you should get them, and here's what all the like gobbledygook of acronyms and things, just like we'll try to boil down the simple stuff to try to equip you to, make these smart choices and everything. So I just, yeah, I see a lot of opportunity in this area for sure to help students while they're in
And we
here.
talk, you hear the term student success thrown around a lot. One of the things you said that I wanted to go back to was student success or academic success. If a student has to work so many hours that they're not spending time on their studies, their career while they're in college is studying. Bottom line is, if they don't have the time to do that, they're not going to do as well. It may take them longer to finish. That builds up more debt. That's another reason why you look at providing this type of education, because you can eliminate a lot of the pitfalls in academics and create an environment that's not just inclusive but breeds success. And I think when I use that term breed, I think it's important. This does not happen by itself. You need that collaboration between the institutional partners, the students, potentially even using outside vendors to support the initiatives to make this happen, to really build that culture of success. The other thing that I think is really what you mentioned, the help that was taking place during the pandemic, this concept of using challenge or completion grants. If a student's having a problem, you're having emergency funds available, or if they're short a couple $100, and that's going to be the difference between stopping out and graduating on time. That investment is so important. But as a student, if you don't know those resources are available, or you don't even think about if you don't think about asking, you don't know. And that's what breeds this failure culture, that we're afraid to ask, what are the resources that my school has? Where do I go to get information? And that's where I think the point again, when you have an inclusive environment, an academic advisor may not be able to tell you specifically about how to get the emergency funds, but they can send you to the right place. And
Mhm.
just, you don't have to have the knowledge across the campus except to be able to make the right referrals
Yeah.
sometimes. And I think that's where we get the success is, not being so compartmentalized to say, well, that's a money thing, so I don't even deal with that. It's really everybody's responsibility in that respect. And I think that's a thing that I've seen grow, especially over the last decade. And the pandemic has moved us from the 20th century well toward the 22nd. We'll leave the 21st out for a number of reasons, but it's been that kind of exponential change that higher ed's not used to. But it's the type of thing that we really needed to have.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like that idea of like, you know, everybody's on the same team at the institution, all the faculty and staff, and everybody kind of chip in and have at least, yeah, that awareness of things that are available. And even if you're like not sure, it's like where it's like maybe student affairs or student support, any other office could like just go check with that, like versus just kind of like, I don't know, like good luck, figure it out. Like, yeah, not my purview, but and certainly, yeah, you'd want to try to, impart that upon students as well, where they might just kind of have a general awareness of like, oh yeah, I feel like I remember something from the dean of students office. Let me just like reach out to a general email or something. But then I think even like beyond that, because that's what I would hope is like the bare minimum versus like the awful past of like people almost just like walling themselves off and just letting students kind of survive or kind of die on their own. But like uh hoping that institutions could try to like proactively identify those students, like if they're seeing where it's like, wow, you've had a past due balance of $200 for like, some amount of time. It's like we could just reach out to you and be like, hey, we can help you, like if you are willing and able to persist and all that. Because like I think that they would obviously want to make sure this is a person who's like is actually engaged. Like they need to like answer their email and maybe like sign some forms to get this money to persist. So it's like, we just need you to like prove you are like aware and accessing your email and whatever. Like we're not just going to like throw money at you and, hope you catch it or whatever.
And,
But
and
yeah, I think
that's one of the things too. What used to be a case will stop you from registering for next semester till you pay in full. Now it's a counseling opportunity. Yeah, how can we help you? It's not so much hardcore collection, it's counseling, it's helping the student, and ultimately building in some of the components of financial education at the same time. I mean, it is a teaching moment outside a classroom. That in itself is a dramatic change in the last couple of years. It's
Mhm.
not so much pay or leave, it's we care about you and here's what we can do to help you.
Yeah.
Big change in the culture.
Yeah. And you love to see it. It's a great thing. And I guess quickly, you alluded to our next two questions. So I just want to see if you have any kind of big thoughts on these quickly as we start to wrap up. But like, the impact of technology on financial education. So it sort of still alludes to that idea of like, are there just persistent fundamentals that kind of are agnostic of, cryptocurrencies and, this, that, or the other thing. So like, what do you see as the impact of technology? Because certainly, yeah, even just like, paying bills online or things like that. But I'm also thinking kind of like there's like just fully digital banks that don't even have like physical branches or different apps that people can use to try to help implement, budgeting or, saving or whatever. So I don't know how you view the impact of technology on financial education.
Well, I think a lot of tools out there. Budgeting's really a critical component to success for students' finances. Budgeting is probably one of the hardest things to teach, but here's where technology does come into play. You not only have the apps that can do a lot of this for you, but you also have the tutorials that tell you a lot more. It's beyond websites or portals now. You can go to an app, you can get what you need right away. You basically, it's very much interactive, and I think that's what young people today need. Frankly, a lot of adults need the same thing. So it's trying to differentiate. I think that's part of financial education. As you're building models for how to do this, you've got to look at your different constituencies. 18 to 22-year-olds come at learning one way. And one way. They come at learning so many different ways. You've got to be able to accommodate those, but you need to have timely, accurate, interesting information. You've got to know what the needs are. So you need to build a flexible program that will deal with not just student loan debt, but what are the differences for a first semester freshman versus someone who's maybe a junior, has different needs with money versus somebody ready to graduate that's looking at tens of thousands of dollars in student loan debt and literally is frozen with fear on how am I going to pay this? And then you hear what else is going on in the world right now with student loan debt, and there's this paralysis, just stops you cold. So I think one of the things for an adult learner, it's totally different. They may be in the work, have been in the workforce, they may currently be in the workforce. You're dealing with families already, other types of debts that they're having to balance versus paying for an education. So the needs are very different. Families, parents are going to have a different perspective. I actually think, Dustin, one of the things financial education offerings at colleges and universities also extend out to their alumni, because why not look at this as a value added service? We can not only help you in dealing with student loan debt, but we can help you make some of the connections. Thinking about investing, you're thinking about networking with other alums that are going through similar experiences. So you've got this connection beyond the traditional student experience, and going back to this high school to grade relationship, you've now built that out, and you're connecting a community with similar issues, similar needs, desires for information. It's I think it kind of is building what higher ed needs to have. It's demonstrating more of that value. There's academic learning, but there's this value added that comes to the table for not just student success, but continuation of community for a lifetime.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a very good point. And I mean, yeah, kind of was the two big things was like, technology, impacting financial education, and kind of what I was hearing from that is like, it's as much about like how you're serving it up, like the modality of that learning as much as the things that you're teaching, which like you could certainly acknowledge the trendy new things that are coming out, but like you do need to like do the work of keeping consistent and relevant and like all that. So where there could be certain fundamentals that you don't need to update as often in terms of just the workshop that you're doing, or if you're putting up a video or something like that, could maybe have a little bit longer of a shelf life. But if you're like, doing a crypto 101 or something, it's like you need to make sure you're probably updating that on at least a quarterly basis to have it be relevant, because otherwise you're going to be, losing students. But yeah, certainly just acknowledging, uh, how students are learning, and you can try to, you know, um, meet those demands. But then, yeah, I mean, with the other part of it that I wanted to explore was what you were just speaking to of, your students that are right out of high school coming straight into college versus adult learners. So like, yeah, just acknowledging and thinking through, being really intentional about, uh honestly, anymore, you need to cater to both audiences. And it may be that like it's very explicitly certain things are marketed towards one of those audiences versus the others. Other things could be everybody. And then just thinking like, hey, let's just invite our entire like community, because it's just like this is stuff that like, again, certain people have like just been wrestling with the ambiguity for a while and maybe done fine, but they're just like, oh my gosh, like, if I could just like know better what I'm doing versus just sort of like fumbling through the dark for, my whole life about like, how do I make financial decisions or whatever. And yeah, like you said, like kind of relying on just like, let me ask my friend who seems to know like a little bit more than I do or something. It's like, let's get an expert in here. They could probably like answer a bunch of questions that you have in the span of like 30 minutes. And you're like, oh my God, like this is incredible. I finally know what the heck's going on. So
And that's the other side of this, that colleges and universities, when you talk about trying to demonstrate value, this becomes a community, because this type of information you can now backtrack into the high schools and into the community to provide this type of knowledge. That starts to help you with your recruiting. It gets name recognition out there. Your brand becomes known. There's so many things that you can do with this above and beyond, from an admissions perspective and from an alumni perspective.
mhm.
Schools have got to start doing more of that, if they're going to achieve the type of success that they're looking for. And I think
Mhm.
that that's going to be a change in the culture that I see going forward. It is not going to be limited to just the student experience. This is going to be an outreach that extends through the community and can provide a lot more service to everyone out there.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, again, it's just an opportunity because yeah, these institutions have subject matter experts in a lot of these areas of, because financial education that we're talking about today, it could be a lot of different things, but like, yeah, and they have these people that they could utilize, and then there's opportunities for creating and maintaining relevance from, yeah, like students who may be making a college decision years from now as they're young people, or with alumni who already, chose your institution and you want to keep your relevance with them, or just kind of um, you know, uh, other kind of constituents and everything. So I think this also segues us nicely to our final question that we ask everybody, because I think the answer to the question of like a connected campus, like that idea of being connected to all these kind of stakeholders and all these sort of things, I think just kind of, relates really well to this. But I will let you answer however you wish of, what we ask everybody to end each episode of this podcast. What does a connected campus look and or feel like to you?
Dustin, if we were having this conversation when I started my career in higher education, it would be this is a day and night. Back then, it was like, let's get in. If you're living on campus, you had this minimal experience in a dormitory, which is now a residence hall. You had classroom experience, and there really wasn't that type of connection except with a small group of individuals, either in your classes or where you were living. You didn't have that campus wide experience. You didn't have faculty, staff really having a concern. It was, we're in to do our jobs, we're home at the end of the day. Now we're into a 24/7 environment. The concept of a connected campus technology just brings us so far forward that it is, we live it now as opposed to having just snippets. We live the experience. So I think the resources become much better known. It's easy access to information. And again, not everybody working in higher education will know the answer to every little question. But knowing where to get information, knowing the referral concept, trying to provide solutions 24/7. We're out of the, I think a connected campus to me is one that's has a good flow, that's inclusive, but not over the top, engulfing individuals. You can pick and choose your moments when you want to step out for a while, step back in, and still feel part of the community. And I think the biggest thing is providing flexibility for students and all stakeholders, having those resources available, and being the prime outlet for information that will lead to success. I think the goal is really, again, more of a holistic perspective. We're not just looking at this for a short term experience, we're looking at this for a life experience and helping to grow individuals, whether they're 18 or 80. It's that growth, that learning, and I think most importantly, we come out of it being better people. I think that's where I see the concept of a connected campus. We take what we start with and we make it a better experience.
Yeah. Well, and I like just sort of like the feeling that I got is just like that, you know, you're connecting in, and that connection can be different at whatever point of, yeah, like through your whole lifetime, and just sort of be maybe like tighter or looser, or just, giving, receiving different things, whatever. Like it's just going to be for each person kind of giving kind of what they need, personalizing things or whatever. And like certainly financial education is an area where, you're going to be having uh, your entire learner community coming in from all different points where like they have never talked with anybody in their entire life about it, or they've tried to research it on their own because they're very curious. So they're kind of some partial information, or people that are super comfortable. So, you want to maintain relevance and that connection with them through that and everything else at the institution. So yeah, like it's a holistic, connection where it's not just like, this kind of transactional thing. Like they know that connection can be a flexible one to give them, different things at different points of life. And yeah, so I like that. It's a very like, adaptable and sort of, flexible and evolving kind of those sort of words are coming up for me now. But yeah, I just appreciate you hanging out and sharing all that you did. And we'll have ways for folks to connect with you and your work. But yeah, it was really fun to explore this. Like I said, I've never really spent a whole episode talking about financial education, and certainly it's its own little pocket area, but relates to so many other things in higher education. So yeah, it's really great talking to you. Thanks again.
Dustin, thank you so much for having me today. And again, if anybody watching or listening has questions or like to talk more, you can always reach me at david@drggroup.com.
Thanks for listening to The Connected Campus. Please leave a 5-star review for the show and share it so others can discover us. Make sure to also subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode of The Connected Campus.